Makes sense, right?
Okay, so we're in the Melacha of Memachek, which is scraping, and also it's Memarech is a tilde. That's a derivative, which is also Torah prohibition, which is smoothing. So we had the example. We're up on page 264. So we have the Torah prohibition is smoothing something that is thick. The example that he gives here is tar, wax, and then included in that would be anything that if you put your finger into it, there will be a hole and that hole will remain, then that would be a Torah prohibition to smooth out. So let's speak about some of the items that would go on the body. So let's take something like Vaseline. If you poke a finger in the Vaseline, what happens to it? Does it remain a hole or does it closes back up? It stays that way. The same thing would be with something like the baby types of cream, let's say you have something that's called Desitin. Those type of items, when you put your finger inside, it stays, it has an imprint. To smooth that out would be a Torah prohibition. The Rabbanan made a restriction on something that is thick, that does not pour, that you could not use either on Shabbos. So the example would be many other lotions. They're not that thick like Vaseline, but they also have body to it. Something that pours and just keeps going without remaining, that would be permissible. So I brought a sample. You have the oils, baby oil, and here I have vitamin E oil. So pouring that, so pouring it is thin enough to, as a liquid, and then it doesn't remain on the hand, it keeps going. So then this would not go into that category. It doesn't have any body to it. It is something that is pourable and goes. Now, there are those who say the same thing would be also, so now what about other items that are for the body? For instance, bar soap. Bar soap could be used on Shabbos. Yes, no? No. That would go into the same category as the Desitin or the Vaseline. That would go into that same category. The same would also be with deodorants. You have the stick deodorant. That would also be a solid that's being rubbed, so that could not be used. Then you have the deodorants that are liquid, and that's a pourable liquid. That would be permissible. And also, what other form is there? The deodorant, you have the stick, you have the roll-on, and then you have the spray. Gel is, where does gel come in? Gel is not allowed to be because that is a thick, heavy substance. So gel is out. So the creams are out, the gels are out, and that would be, so the sprays are permissible.
Spray?
The deodorant spray. so the sprays and the roll-ons are permissible. So the others that are not would be the solids and the gels and the stone-like deodorant that also these would be forbidden. Now, as far as the reason what, yes? Hairspray. We'll come to that in another chapter that goes with building, making something into a certain shape. That goes into another chapter, we'll leave it for there. So so now we have another issue which has another chapter to it, but we'll just discuss it briefly here. And that is, what is the purpose of the, no, we have scented and unscented of deodorants. Unscented, there's no issue if it's going to be a roll-on or a spray. Now, what about the scented ones? Now, what do we consider that? Are we considering that as taking away a foul odor? Or are we considering that as a perfume? What is it?
The first one.
Huh?
The first one.
The first one is taking away body odor. Okay, so if one is using it now, using perfumes on Shabbos, there are two opinions about this. If you scent garments, that is forbidden. Making garments smell nice, that cannot be done. At one time, they used to have these different fragrant spices, and they used to put that on the coals, and they used to spread the garments over it. The garments used to absorb that nice scent. That was the way they used to scent garments. So that is forbidden. Creating a scent is forbidden. Question comes, what about having it on the body? Is that permissible or forbidden? And there are different halachic authorities that deal with it. The Alter Rebbe in Chabad, so scenting the body on Shabbos for its fragrance cannot be done. It's called Moiled Reach, creating a scent. In other circles, they go according to the more lenient opinion that since it's on the body, it's not lasting, so they are more lenient about it. So this would be the two opinions. So therefore, the question would be when it comes to deodorant that does have so it doesn't have a scent, there is no question about it whatsoever. If it does have a scent, it would be, we would have to go into what is the purpose of the scent. Is it just to take away the body odor, or is it to create a pleasant scent? So that's where that issue would be involved. The same thing would be, what about spraying scent in the room? So that would depend on your purpose. If it's to take away a bad smell, then it's permissible. If it's to create a good smell, then that would not be done on Shabbos. So go on 264, we'll look at the different topics. Polishing shoes would have two prohibitions. One of them is coloring, dyeing, even though it's the same color as the shoe, but it's reinforcing that color. So that becomes the melacha of dyeing, of coloring. And if it is a cream, a shoe cream, then polishing them with that cream, spreading it out is also the melacha of smoothing, taking the cream of the shoe polish and smearing it. That would go into this melacha. The shoe cream is a thick, heavy substance. They come in two forms. One of them is a solid, that would actually be the Torah prohibition. The other one also keeps body. So both of them using those, that would go into the malacha that we're speaking about now, is taking a thick substance and smoothing it. So then it's two prohibitions that would be involved in polishing shoes on Shabbos. Now, the next is putting an ointment on a bandage or a wound. The ointment, let's take something like bacitration. or all the different types of creams that usually come in a tube. So let's say when I'm speaking about bacitracin, that's a solid. If it would be in a cup, it would hold its form completely. So that's a solid. So bacitracin and those types of antibiotical creams. So spreading that on a bandage or a wound is forbidden. It goes into this malacha. What about if someone is concerned about an infection? So you could take from the tube and just put it on that area without smoothing it out. Smoothing itself is the malacha. Just putting it on would be a rabbinic prohibition. The Rabbanan say that since we are concerned about an infection, which could lead to something pretty serious, so you could dab it, put it on, and then cover it, and that itself, if it spreads through the covering, that's incidental. That would be secondary, as long as you're not doing it yourself. Okay. Taking the bandage itself, and putting the cream on it and smoothing it out on the bandage, that cannot be done. So you cannot do it on the area. You cannot do it on the bandage itself. It has to be done directly on the area, and then you put the bandage over it. Putting a bandage without ointment is to protect it. That's fine. Hand cream, body cream, those are all forbidden. A liquid is permissible if it is something that pours easily, and since it's a liquid, it spreads by itself. So you have the example that I give here is something that is an insect repellent. So that would be fine. It's liquidy enough, it pours. Now, concerning liquid soap. We have liquid soap. So we have, let's take dishwasher soap. Usually, what they tell you on the packaging is that it's concentrated 10 times as much. You know, what they did is, so at one time, when all the liquid soaps were really like water-like. And then they tell you that it's concentrated and it's so you can use less and get more for your bottle. So in that case, that would be thick. So if you want to use that, so if you have the brand that is horrible like water, then there's no issue. If it's a very concentrated and thick, so it is suggested that one dilutes it before Shabbos. You'll get twice as much. So it should be pourable like water-like, or like we poured this. So this is something to be concerned about. The same thing would also be with liquid soap that you wash your hands. So there too, they make it very thick. It's suggested that one pours some water into it to make it diluted. It should be more pourable, and that would be permissible. Same thing would be something that you have the face cleansers. You have something that's called Cetaphil, using a name. Cetaphil usually is pourable. I don't think it keeps its shape. It's pretty liquid-like. That would be fine. You have the others, they would have more body to it. So you have the lotion. The lotion would be something that you would not use on Shabbos because it has body to it. It is something that is spreadable. As far as rash, we spoke about this last time. Putting baby oil is fine. A baby with a rash, if it's something, a powder would be fine. Oil is fine. And then if you have that it needs actually an ointment, so you put it directly on the skin and put the diaper on top of it and let the diaper spread it out, not to spread it yourself. Next page, 266. Solid soap on Shabbos is an issue in this chapter. Liquid soap, we have the second paragraph, they recommend that you dilute it, so it should be more, not like a thick liquid, but rather like water-like. Brushing one's teeth. Brushing the teeth on Shabbos. So what were you told about that?
Not allowed.
Not allowed. Okay. What are the issues?
You might believe.
That might bleed, that's one thing. If someone has healthy gums, what would be the issue? So we have now the toothpaste. Toothpaste, what category does toothpaste go into? That would be like
Squeezing.
an ointment. It would be like something like Desitin or something like that. So it has body to it. So spreading that out would be an issue. Another thing some are concerned about is the toothbrush itself. Now, what about mouth? So mouthwash is fine. So mouthwash is good. Let's see what else can be done. Now they have they have something that's called a Shabbos brush. Did anyone have any experience with a Shabbos brush? So from what I've seen, I never sort of bought one to see how it actually goes, but what I've seen in the packaging, it has rubber bristles. So it does not hold the water. It's rubber bristles that are spread out, and they use it with a liquid tooth cleaner that's also pourable like water. So you sort of you pour the liquid tooth cleaner on the rubber brush, and you use that. I don't imagine it would be a very comfortable, with those rubber, they're very spread out and they're pretty big. So I don't think it would be a very comfortable brushing with that type of brush. Since then, they've come up with another. I guess no one wanted to use that because it was not very practical. People did not feel brushing their teeth. So they came out with another one. I'd have to sort of pick up the other one and see what the new one is like and be able to report back to see what they've improved and if it's something that would be acceptable for Shabbos. So again, if someone is concerned about, you could use a mouthwash on Shabbos. And right before Shabbos, brush your teeth, and right after Shabbos, brush your teeth, and use the mouthwash in between. What about the flossing? So you can't cut the floss. If it becomes already prepared, if you have healthy gums, and the floss is not going to tear, then you could use the floss on Shabbos. You don't rinse your mouth. Playing with clay or the different kind of clay-like toys. What would be the name of it? It has a name to it. What is it? Silly putty, clay, modeling clay, or all these type of materials that you form into different shapes. So that is not a toy that could be used by children on Shabbos because it goes into this category that we're speaking about. Any questions on this? Okay. Next chapter is scoring, is chartate, making lines. So the hide was now a finished product. It was smooth. It was preserved. It is now ready for the next step. The next step is, as you see the picture, it has all kinds of different edges to it. If you want to use it, you want to have a certain size. So then scoring it, making the lines, after which you're going to be cutting along those lines or using those lines as your guide. So that is the next melacha. So to score a line in order to mark the place for cutting, to lengthen it, shortening, that all would be the malacha, and that the malacha, as it was used in the Mishkan, they actually cut along those lines to make the leather the size they wanted. The tolda is scoring in order to write on a straight line. So when they would use the parchment, you do it when you have mezuzahs or tefillin or Torah, before the sofer writes, he first scores lines in order that his writing should be on a line. You don't see any actual ink on the lines. What you do is you take, since it is made of parchment, so if you take a sharp instrument and you make a line on it, that line is going to remain. And then when the sofer writes, he's able to use that as his guide to write within those lines. So doing that on Shabbos is the malacha. Then as far as scoring, even if it's without a tool, but using a knife, a nail, a fingernail, or anything else that's used for scoring to make a line that will keep its mark, that is forbidden on Shabbos. However, if you do it on food, then there is no issue. So if someone is cutting a cake and they want to divide the portions, so they make these lines, and then later when you're going to cut along those lines, that is permissible. The same thing is also, we do actually scoring, which becomes a part of the Shabbos meal, is when before we make the hametzi on the lechem mishnah, on the 2 loaves. So beforehand, have you noticed that there is a scoring before, and then they make the hametzi, and then they cut the challah. So this would be the scoring. So why was the scoring done? What was the purpose of this? Why do you make a line on the challah? Why do that? But you've seen that the challahs are scored. Okay, now, depending on the how heavy the challah is, how long it takes actually to cut it, that would make a difference. We have a halacha in the weekdays. We try to make the bracha and the eating of the food over which we make the bracha as close as possible. So therefore, during the week, when someone is going to be eating a slice of bread, so since there is no specific halacha that has to be completely whole, so halachically, if you cut something, and if you hold the smaller piece, and the larger piece is still attached to it, that's considered whole, halachically. So now, during the weekdays, we want to make the hametzion bread and eat the bread as close as possible after the bracha. So halachically, what we do is we cut or break the slice so that the smaller piece will still be attached to the larger piece, and the smaller piece is still, when you hold the smaller piece, it's not good, if the larger piece is not going to fall off, so it's still considered attached. Then we put all 10 fingers on the bread, we make the hametzi, immediately we tear the piece, and then we eat of it. So we're trying to save the time it takes to tear the bread from the bracha to the eating. Is everyone aware that we have when we make a bracha on bread, that you have 10 fingers that you hold on to it? Are you familiar with that? Okay, the reason behind it is there are many different reasons. One of them is in Ashrei, we have a pasuk that reads, Einei chayil elecha yisaberu v'ata noisen lahem es achlam b'tay. Everyone hopes to you, and you give each one their food in their proper time. So we have 10 words in the pasuk that speaks about Hashem providing our needs. Bread is considered the major part of our meal. So we have the 10 fingers holding on to the bread when we make the hamaitzi. A second reason is that there are 10 melachos that are involved and 10 mitzvahs that are involved in the production of bread. So among the mitzvahs is that when you are plowing, you're not allowed to plow with two animals of different species. Number two, when an animal is working with the grain, you're not allowed to put a muzzle on the animal. Then when the crop is ready, there are the mitzvah that you give to the poor. Leket, single stalks, shikha, the bundles that are forgotten, and peah, the corner of the field. Then we have separation of giving truma to the Kohen, then Maisa, Rishon to the Levi, and then depending on what year it is, giving the second tithe of 10% to the poor. So we have 8. Then we have the mitzvah of challah. So here we go. So we're missing one. So let's see. So we have plowing. Oh, and before you start to, when you're going to be planting, putting the seeds inside, you're not allowed to mix the species as well, which is klayim of zroim. So that's number 10. That starts, it's more in the beginning. So we have 10 mitzvahs that in order for us to be able to have the bread, there are 10 mitzvahs. This is in Eretz Yisrael. They do have the mitzvahs of separating Truma, Maisa, Rishon, Maisa, Sheni. All of this is done by the, so when you get something from Eretz Yisrael, and it has a hechsher on it, it tells you that all of the separations of the mitzvahs that are required were done. So that would include the truma to the kohen, set aside for the kohen, for the levi, and for the poor, and then also challah if it's a baked good. So they also separate challah. So these are the 10 mitzvahs that are connected. So when we are holding now, so we have 3 reasons. One, because the pasuk speaks about Hashem provides for us, has 10 words. Then we have the 10 mitzvahs that are connected to production of bread. And then we also have, in order for us to be able to elevate the food that we're eating, so it has sparks of godliness in it. When we make a bracha, we energize ourselves, get a higher level of kedusha in order to be able to extract these godly sparks and be able to use it and elevate them to their source. So the 10 fingers represent the 10 faculties that we have that you've learned in Tanya, yes? Chachma Bina Das, right? The 3 intellectual parts, and then we have the 7 emotive parts. So all 10 of our faculties we use to elevate the food that we eat. So eating food is a big avodah. Now, so therefore, so during the weekday, that is the way we make the bracha. Now on Shabbos, we also want to make the bracha and eat the food as close as possible. But on Shabbos, we're not going to break it in parts, to have a smaller piece and a bigger piece. It's going to be shlemus, it's going to be completely whole. So therefore, what we do is we make a score. How much does it save us? Fraction of a second? No, but the fact that we scored, and now we're going to be able to cut out the scoring, really doesn't save us much, but even tells us, even that amount of time is also something that we are concerned about, that we're trying to make to save time and how precious time is. So that's a lesson each time we make that. On Shabbos, we're scoring the food. If you're going to, now the person who scores it, if he has to look for the scoring, he shouldn't cut on the score. It's supposed to save him time. If it's going to make extra time of looking for the scoring where it is, then you defeated the purpose. So also, nowadays, everything is fluff. When you bake a bread, and you have to cut it. Did anyone bake bread? And when you cut it, is it heavy? And when you have to cut it, you actually have to saw the bread.
Well, it depends on what kind of bread.
Matters what kind of flour you're using, yes. If you're using the sourdough or not. So some of the bread actually, when you're cutting it, that really takes time. But the breads that we usually have now are so fluff Takes no time at all to break it, tear it. I'm just saying it's a different, but if the breads that are actually heavy, that really makes a difference if you're going to cut it beforehand, partially or not. So if someone is making hamaitzi on matzah, did you ever see anyone score the matzah? Because that does not take any time at all for you to break it, so there's no need to make any scoring. So if you're making a hamaitzi on matzah, so then you don't have to score. Any questions? Okay, next chapter, cutting. Now, after it was scored, and you actually have the size that you want by scoring it, which itself is a malacha, the next part is cutting it according to a measure. So the malacha is cutting leather according to a measurement. And the Torah is to cut something off where it's commonly done by hand and someone wants a certain size. Since anything that is cut with a tool, being particular about the measurement, these are all Torah prohibition. Cutting something that is by hand, that is usually cut with a tool, is rabbinic. And we had that in the previous chapter when we spoke about cutting nails. Cutting nails usually is cut to a measure, right? There's a certain area that you want to cut your nails. Cutting with a tool, a scissor or nail clipper would be a Torah prohibition. Cutting it by hand or with the teeth, that would be rabbinic. So let's look at making a toothpick, making it to a certain size, cutting fabric, cutting threads to a certain size. These are all the Torah prohibition. Now, cutting things that have markings on them, for instance, cutting off, if you have a roll of bags, so you have either garbage bags or you have plastic bags that come on a roll. And they're perforated to begin with. Then when you want this bag, you rip it off at the perforation. That would be a part of this malacha, because you are cutting it to a certain size. You want it only there and nowhere else, because if you tear it somewhere else, you're going to have a bag that has two openings, one on the top, one on the bottom, because when you cut at the preparation, that is you're cutting it in a way that the bottom is sealed. If you cut it in the middle, then you're going to have two openings. So therefore, you want it to be cut specifically on the preparation in order to be able to use the bag. In that case, that is the prohibition. The same thing also, you have the tablecloths on a big roll. You unroll it, then there's a preparation where you cut it for the certain size that you want it. So that too cannot be done on Shabbos. Now, the example that they give you is there's a cork. The wines have a cork, and some people have wine stoppers, right? So that's after you've taken the cork out, when you want to close the bottle, you use a special wine stopper. Others will take the cork, and it has two ends to it. There's the wide end, there's a narrow end. So sometimes the narrow end is narrow enough that you could push it back into the bottle to use that as your bottle stopper. But sometimes, if it's too wide, are you allowed to take a knife and make it narrower with a knife? So here, this would go into this malacha that you're not allowed to, because you're trying to cut it to a certain size so it will fit the opening of the bottle. So this would be a part of this malacha. Now, what about cutting food? So cutting food is fine. Now, so we'll finish this chapter next time. We have still a few Opening up containers that like yogurt, and they're stuck together. So we'll speak about that as well. Cutting paper, toilet paper, I think we've covered that at a previous time. That we said if there's a box of toilet paper, you try to open the box, not. So someone is stuck, the only toilet paper is this. So what you could not do, could you tear the tab off? That's cutting it to size. You want it to be size, so that cannot be done. What you could do would be, what's the next thing? You would have to cut it.
No, you can open the flap.
So the flap, but the flap is glued together. You cannot unglue.
Oh.
So we have ungluing. It's better to cut it than to unglue it, because ungluing itself is something that's considered like sewn, and undoing it would be that malacha. So what we'll do is find a place where there are no words, cut along the side, and then you'll be able to extract the paper out. So ungluing cannot be done, and cutting by on the tab could also not be done. Okay, so we'll stop here. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so we have